in a situation where he's won cups with 2 different franchises. It's hard to do to get one, but to do it twice and then 3 times and then 2 different cities, pretty impressive.
Yeah, not many people with the credentials, certainly the Hall of Fame credentials of Jim Rutherford. I just feel so good for him. I remember being in college and just meeting people from Pittsburgh, and a couple of them were really big Jim Rutherford fans, even though he was like kind of a part-time goalie here for a short time. And then for him to have him, just come full circle back to Pittsburgh at such a critical time for the organization and deliver 2 more cups to them. I mean, that's a great accomplishment, and congratulations to him. I feel.
What do you think his best asset is as a GM?
Well, I think it's flexibility. I think he's somebody who doesn't really have, certainly has principles by which he operates strategically and stuff, but he's very flexible within those principles, and he's a good analyst of what the team needs, and he's a good scout. He's still a good scout. He sees things in players that others don't, and I feel great for him.
Yeah, and I do. He's a tremendous man, and I think he's also very fearless. Mm-hmm. He's at a stage of his career. He told me once, "Hey, I've done a lot here. I can go after things that I think I want." He's aggressive to do it, and when he makes a mistake, he's not afraid to tell you he made a mistake.
Right. And
I love that quality. Let's go out to Will in McKees Rocks. Hello, Will. How are you this evening?
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you tonight?
We're good, thanks. Always good to hear from you.
Oh, you too as well. Thank you. Listen, with the hire of Charrington today, and the process just seeming so late, do you think they're going to hire a manager from outside or from the inside the organization?
Outside. That's my guess. Gene, what's yours? Thanks, Will.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
He wants to know if he believes you're going to hire a manager from the outside or inside the organization.
No, I think I think the Pirates have made it pretty clear they're going outside. Really, anybody who had anything to do with the last couple of years here should not be here.
Kyle Starr got removed from his job, although other guys in the organization are still here, and he seems to like a lot of those guys, so we'll see how it goes. Line 3 we go. It's Jim in the South Hills. Hey, Jim, welcome to the Sports Call. Go right ahead.
Thanks for taking my call, Bob.
Sure.
My question and comment really is directed towards Gene. Gene, I loved your article yesterday about Antonio Brown.
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah,
good reading.
Really good. It's not the kind of stuff you usually get in the newspaper. Gene Dick.
Gene therapy, baby. That's what it is.
He's good. He's good. I'm probably as old as he is, so I've been reading his articles. But anyway, Gene, one of the things that I'm sure you dug into Antonio's history. Does anybody know what kind of high school he went to and what he was like as a kid? And I know he went to is Eastern Michigan, or Western Michigan for college?
Central Michigan?
Central Michigan,
yeah.
Whatever. That's either 3 or too many. But anyway, I was wondering if you knew what kind of kid he was, because his behavior.
But he had a rough childhood. I know that, like a lot of people did.
Well, sure, and I'm just wondering, Gene, if you dug into that and if you found anything out, because I've been thinking for quite a while that might have been one of the things that happened to him. He just couldn't, accept the success he got.
All right, thanks, Gene.
I can't hear anything.
Oh.
Sorry.
I can't repeat all of that to you.
No,
What you know about Antonio Brown's childhood?
Sounded like a compliment.
Did you find anything else in his history as growing up that may have impacted the way he's turned out?
Well, Antonio Brown, I always rooted for him in the first couple of years that he was here because he really had a terrible childhood. He was, in fact, effectively homeless for a portion of his high school career. Then he wound up through a series of machinations out at Central Michigan. He had a terrible childhood. But I'm not a psychiatrist. I was just trying to make the point that we've seen people with these symptoms before, and a lot of times they're from head injuries, and it's like we're forgetting that that's a possibility. That's all I was trying to say.
That is a possibility, and you can, if you want to, and we won't know this at all until later in the process, but Antonio Brown has taken some pretty severe headshots, and we have seen guys who've had issues because of that, and whether or not that's the case, but I can tell you this, it seems to me like his behavior changed pretty radically after the one by Burfict. I know that's easy to say right now, we don't know, but it did. I mean, he was here for a lot of years, and he thrived, even though he was somebody who wanted specialized treatment, whatever the case. But, when you get a guy putting that much on the field and putting the stats out there, you'll do that if you can get that year.
He would occasionally get upset about not being thrown the ball and that kind of stuff. But generally, he was known as a pretty solid guy, somebody who didn't get in trouble off the field. But after the Burfict hit, 70% all the negative news that he's made has come after that hit.
Right. We have some tweets. Ed Miller says, any word on discipline for the players that hit Juju and Johnson? Well, Randall got ejected, and he's going to face a fine, but I don't know that there'll be a suspension with that. Most likely it's a fine. And as far as the Juju hit, no, he suffered a leg injury as well on that same exact play, apparently. So, not sure. Matt says, never got a chance to call the sports call, but what was more disgusting display in your opinion, guys? The latest Steeler-Brown incident or the Penguins-Islanders game a few years ago. Do you remember that one in Long Island when they had, it was all sorts of people. I don't like the fact that they both were ugly, I'll say that. The one in Cleveland was just one guy who decided to lose his mind at the wrong time and swing a helmet as a weapon. I've never seen that in football, not making contact to somebody's head.
No, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen. But the ejection for the helmet-to-helmet on Deontay Johnson was a really bad play, too. That's the exact kind of play that football is trying to rid itself of. I don't understand how it keeps happening. It's not cautioning players about that play.
And Butler, hey, David, how are you tonight?
Hey, guys, good. I'm good. I wanted to just kind of give you a comment and listen to your response.
Mm-hmm.
Having to do with Lamar Jackson, the way the trend is in the NFL nowadays toward the quarterback, the running quarterback, I foresee someday Lamar Jackson actually leading the league in rushing. I'm going to hang up and listen.
Yeah, he might. I mean, he's done something that a quarterback. Talking about Lamar Jackson and his ability to rush the football. Once again, 86 yards yesterday. First quarterback ever to have 7 straight games of over 60 yards rushing. On top of that, 4 touchdown passes. If I had to ask you 10 weeks into it, who's your MVP? He would be mine with a close push from Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I like Russell Wilson for that and Christian McCaffrey too. But right now, I think Lamar Jackson's the best player in the league.
And that team looks right now like it could be the best team in the American Football Conference, even better than New England. After all, they beat them head-to-head pretty thoroughly. So we'll see how that goes. And home field will be interesting, and that'll be important as they move forward in this. But if the Steelers are going to make the playoffs, it doesn't look like it's going to be by winning a division. They're going to have to work hard in a wild card. We will come back with more. It's 412-575-2600. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call on the Bordas & Bordas Hotline. We return right after this short timeout.